All right, so that looks pretty good. What I'm pointing to here is the edge of the handle. So when we cut a slab, it's going to have sort of a sharp edge. And that sharp edge is going to be, not so great to work with. And we really want to make sure we clean up those edges, at least to the point where we've smoothed them down to where they're rounded. Because if they're rounded, they're going to be pleasant to hold, they're going to be pleasant to touch, and they're not going to cut us because we're going to be turning these into, ceramic. It's going to be like a rock, and what was soft when it's wet is going to be sharp when it's fired. So as it fires, it'll get sharper and sharper. So we're going to prevent that by just smoothing down that sharp edge, just with a little water in our fingertips. Now, I just want to make sure that there's a little canvas marks on here, so I'm going to take my fingertips and get them wet and just clean up any marks that I've left. And I don't want to use a lot of water to do this, just a little bit will take care of it. Because if I use too much water, it'll get too soft and it'll get floppy. So we just want to use a little bit to just sort of clean it up. Ah, beautiful. What a lovely cup. So it's too wet to do anything with now. It's too wet to cut or trim. I'm going to come back later and we're going to pull the tube out and we're going to trim the top, and it'll be really nice to work with when we let it set up and dry. I'm going to put it aside and come back to it later. Okay, so I've just grabbed a bowl for all my little trimming bits. If I hold on to these, I can, make slip, or I can rehydrate them. All of this is still good, except it's just not perfectly usable for building. But I'm going to save all this because I can repurpose it and make it clay again. It's just going to take a little bit of process. So whenever you start your new build, you're going to want to make sure your workspace is clean. That's the kicker. Compress, compress, compress. So do this with every slab. And you can kind of see like a color shift as I compress, sort of like carpet. There's some carpets, if you run your hands against it, it'll change like color, or like mermaid sequence almost. You can sort of see where I've compressed and where I haven't. There's a visible dimension. There was some gunk there, so I went ahead and just scraped. I don't recommend trying to compress with water. The reason being is sometimes you just end up making a lot of slip, and that's not really helpful. It's not gonna aid our quest. So I've decided I sort of want a curvy cup. A little funny, not exactly like your typical cup. I am going to make this one a little funky. We like a funky cup. We're gonna work with that. So I've taken off this top half, and I'm gonna set that aside for later. I can use that. And we're really gonna make some design choices here. So I want it to curve in at the bottom, and the only way to do that is to create something called the dart. Just like with fabric, if you cut out a little triangle and then resew it together, you can make it come like a little more fitted, a little more clean. So this shape, what I'm doing is I've cut out one triangle and I'm replicating the cut by just using that same triangle as a guide. And I'm going to do that, you know, all the way across. So that first sort of flat triangle, I'm going to make sure that I get about the right size on all of them. It's about 2 inches, give or take. So I'm going to make sure I line that up here before I go and make my next triangle cut. Boom. And it's looking pretty good. So once again, I'm gonna make sure I've got my distance about right. And I've got a full triangle, so I'm just gonna use the full triangle this time instead of the half triangle. And I'm gonna line that cut up. And it might not be perfect, but it's probably pretty good. And sometimes pretty good is enough. So I'm going to grab something to sort of give it a little structure. I've got this water bottle here. If you've got just a cup or something, this is just initially to get a good feel for the shape and see how I like it. I'm not going to use that fourth section. I'm only going to use these 3. So I'm going to go ahead and just slice that off because I only need the 3 halves. Now, these slabs I rolled out the day before. So I just spent a couple, like an hour or so, and I rolled out all the slabs I would need to build all of these projects that I'm filming today. I wrapped them up just lightly. And then before I was getting ready to use them, what I did was I took the plastic off and I let them breathe for about an hour. So we're going to go ahead and make our connections. We're going to do this one on the side first. Just line that up. Make sure your connection's good. Sort of use the end of your wooden knife, that rounded part, and just scrape your bits together and clean up your connection. So the way this is gonna work is it's gonna come together on the edge and it's gonna leave a little triangle at the top. But, you know, make sure you score and you slip your sides. And I'm gonna just cut a little bit off to make it cleaner. And if I cut it at sort of an angle, those angles will come together cleaner than if it were just a flat surface. And really we want to do like a 45-degree angle. I mean, this is not a right angle exactly, but a 45-degree angle in essence will create a really nice connection. Once again, I'm going to cut a little angle into the sides of my piece. We're going to use our slip and score. And I'm pinching it together. One more time, an angle. And you can do this with a bowl too. So if you want sort of an angled bowl, the way you would do it is you'd roll out a really long slab and cut those triangles wider. So you'd have more material at the bottom, and it wouldn't be quite as tall. Your slab would be long but short. And this logic will work if you want to do like 5 sides or 4 sides or 3 sides. You don't have to just settle for 3. You can do as many sides as you want. And honestly, the more sides you do, the more likely you're to have a bowl. So the fact that I've only done 3 means this is going to be a cup. I'm going to go ahead and slice a little bit off the top here. And the reason is I want my base to be a little wider than that narrow triangle because I want it to be able to sit on the table pretty nicely. And I'm going to go ahead and score for my base. And do you remember that triangle we cut earlier? How convenient, it's just about the right size for our base. So, you know, save those little bits you cut off because you can be really economical with it and just, because that's just about perfect. It's not exactly perfect, but it's just about perfect. Looks pretty good.